space that we have created here at the New Media Hub to bring together people such as yourself. So we're honored that you could join us in this space. I'll just introduce Mrs. Charity Binka, who's our chairperson for today. She is the vice chairperson of our board at Penplusbytes, and she herself is a powerhouse in terms of ICT. She's been using ICT and advocating for ICT use, especially in the area of empowering young girls and female journalists. She has an NGO which trains this key populations, and this NGO is called WOMEC. But we're not dwelling on that today. We're looking at her as our vice chairperson at Penplusbytes, Mrs. Charity Binka, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Actually, my NGO is called Women, Media and Change, and the acronym is WOMEC. I'm really very excited to be here this evening because I've been hearing about the 40-year plan that we have, development plan. I kept on asking myself, why 40 years? Why 40 years? So I'm really very excited to be here to also listen to all this about and what we can all do. And I really just say that Dr. Thompson, the president of Penplusbytes, my dear Kwame, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. How many ladies do we have here? Yeah. We should be more. Next time when I come, we should have more women here. Anyway, I am not the main speaker. I'm sure you haven't come to listen to me, so I'll be very brief in my remarks. I am very happy to see all of you here this evening at the New Media Hub. Because sometimes all the time when I come here, I'm so proud to be part of the Penplusbytes family. People ask me, what is Penplusbytes? You know, the name is very unique. You have to actually rely on your tongue very well to be able to pronounce it. Penplusbytes. And now my simple answer is, they are the trailblazers in the technology as far as getting the media and other selected community to use. You know, sometimes say technology, people beyond emails and now WhatsApp and others, people don't know that technology can really make a difference like that. So I'm very proud that we are the trailblazers and we are the enablers. And that is why tonight we have brought you here again to come and let's discuss how we can use technology to make this 40-year plan a reality. Penplusbytes has been here for over 40 years. And I simply run a principle that good governance can only be achieved with the active participation of all, including all of us here. And to that end, the Penplusbytes has built a class of projects and programs, all directed at providing citizens a chance to participate in governance, and also to give the opportunity to decision makers to explain their decisions. Sometimes we don't understand their decisions. They are the only people who understand. But we engage them, we engage the parliamentarians, and many people. In fact, it's not long ago, I was here to share an occasion where we got projects for young girls, every people in the institutions that to reform them. We all need to have a discussion how we can use technology to make them citizens that access to society and not rebels that we armed robbers and all that. Penplusbytes always thinks about doing something different and something new, and that is why I'm really very proud that I'm associated with such a great organization. In the current development space, I believe this is called closing the feedback loop, or quite simply ensuring inclusiveness. We all must be part of this, so that when finally we achieve, maybe 40 years, some of us may not be here, maybe be here, I don't know. But unfortunately, most of us are young, or including myself. I also tell myself I'm so young. Depends on how you see yourself. We'll be here to tell the story, and we'll sure you be part of that story. Tonight, we are honored to have a distinguished Ghanaian who has actually made us proud by coming up with this plan. I'm sure maybe a few years back, we never thought about having a 40-year plan. Because every political party would like to have plans. We have to, we should 2020, we have this, we have S2, 1, all that. 40 years. Plan that every government will be compelled to look at and also implement. Tonight, Dr. Thompson, the Director General of the National Development Planning Commission, will speak to us about the processes they have taken or they have used to ensure that the voices of all Ghanaians are heard and counted in the 40-year development plan process. Dr. Thompson, ladies and gentlemen, you all know that development plan is an important document for every. So if you don't plan, then you plan to fail, isn't it? So if you have a plan, then we are well intentioned as a country. A document, such a document you will see as a crucible in which all the aspirations of a sovereign people as we are can be melded to arrive at a truly safe, just, and free society. It is the blueprint which countries such as Singapore, Malaysia, and all other Asian giants are used to achieve what they have. That's why today we hear people going there, they are going to Singapore, they are going to shop. All our, in fact, sometimes you people on the plane, they are going to Dubai, they are going here, they are going there, you just don't know. Sometimes they can't even speak English, they ask you to write for them, they fill the form for them. What have they done differently that we haven't been able to do? This is the time for us to begin to find answers to those questions. And I think that the blueprint that we have now is the 40-year development plan, seeks to answer all these questions and push us to where we should be. Actually, in Ghana, we don't have any excuse to be where we are now. We don't have wars. We are also united. We are together. Why are we not moving as fast as we should? To answer these questions and many others, Dr. will be listening to Dr. Thompson tonight. Somebody will ask, why are they taking us so long to start talking about a 40-year development plan? To such a question, my simple answer will be to turn to the good book which says that the race is not for the sweet, nor the battle for the strong. We have to take one step at a time. Today, we are taking a giant step and we should be applauding ourselves. I'm very certain that our development plan will benefit from the experiences of all other countries who have had a youth development plans to accelerate their growth. The proof will be in this evening's encounter with Dr. Thompson, who is going to explain to us the current methods of the commission is using to get wider participation in putting together the plan so that we can all relate to it. So that we will not say their plan, but we will say our plan. This process is not something that I think others who have gone before us on this path of development, they don't have these long spanning plans. I think ours is very unique, and we are benefiting from it because they have not benefited from that. Not while in these countries have had a luxury that we now have of putting technology to use and to make sure that every voice is heard and accounted for in the 40-year plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we have not come to listen to me. We have come to listen to our dear, our own Dr. Thompson. So permit me to take my seat and allow him to tell us how we are going to use the medical dimensions to be able to make sure that this plan is actually implemented to the benefit of all Ghanaians and the world at large. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Benka. So Dr. Thompson needs no introduction. We know him. He is a renowned economist, and he is now currently the Director General of the NDPC. Dr. Thompson, your audience tonight is made up of technology experts, media people, and all people who are interested in participatory democracy. So thank you very much, Dr. Thompson. Ladies and gentlemen.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and explain the 14-year or the long-term national development plan. When Mrs. Binker said 40, I should come and explain the 40 years. The lady behind her now said, yes, you should come and So, yes, I'm here to explain that. God willing, 40 years from now, we'll all be meeting here to review the plan. Some of us may come here with walking sticks. Some of us may come in wheelchairs, stumped over and all that, but hopefully we'll do justice to that. But just to put things within context. In 2011, Parliament passed a law called Act 815, Petroleum Revenue Management Act, that specifically said that we must have a long-term national development plan approved by Parliament. We haven't done anything since then, but there's actually a law. Parliament is sitting there waiting for a long-term national development plan that it will approve and make sure that it's implemented. We haven't done that. In the same year, coincidentally, the Constitution Review Commission submitted its report. The report was entitled From Political to Developmental Constitution. There was the belief that our Constitution was too skewed towards political expediencies and that it was time to reorient it towards development. And so they submitted their report with that theme or title. When they started their deliberations or consultations within Ghana and outside Ghana, they had a number of issue areas that included everything except development planning. However, as they went around the country, there was widespread and popular demand for us to have a long-term national development plan. And so, Chapter 3 of the report actually deals with the need for us to have a long-term national development plan with constitutional backing. The Constitution itself makes general provision for us to have what is known as multi-year rolling budgets or broad development plan. It doesn't specifically use the term long-term national development plan, but ultimately that's what it translates into. So in terms of the legal basis, this is where we're coming from. There's a legal aspect where we should have, if anything, we are 4 or even 5 years late in terms of producing a long-term national development plan. Let me clarify that we don't as yet have the plan. And I'm emphasizing that because we keep receiving requests from both within the country and outside, people asking for copies of the long-term national development plan, which kind of makes us feel bad because we cannot meet this growing appetite. It shows that there's some hunger there for the long-term national development plan. But we are working on it, and we explained it to them that what we did on August 4th was to launch the process for the preparation of the long-term national development plan. The plan itself should run from 2018 to 2057, and I'll explain why that is the case in a second. But just to give you a sense of what a national development plan is and what goes into it and how it's ultimately operationalized. The plan or national development plan simply is the collection, it reflects the aspirations and wishes of the people in terms of how they want to live their lives. So if you read the Constitution, and if you haven't read anything at all in the Constitution, I strongly recommend that you read Chapter 6, the Directive Principles of State Policy, which is perhaps one of the most progressive aspects of any constitution that you can find. Only yesterday I met with a delegation from Sierra Leone who are here to also study our approach. So there's that aspect of the constitution that guides us to prepare the long-term national development plan. And out of that, we have the vision for the country, which is to build a just, free, and prosperous society. But ultimately, that's what the development plan is the social and economic aspirations of the people. Those aspirations must find expression in physical space. So if you want to have good education, you must build schools. Where the schools are placed and how many people it takes and so on and so forth and so on, also reflected in there. So we have that. And then there's what we call the demographic imperative for long-term planning. There's no law per se requiring that, but common sense, given the figures, suggests that we must take the long-term view to that. And what is the demographic imperative for long-term planning? In 2010, we had the population and housing census. And at that time, we were informed that the population of Ghana was 24.5 million. As I speak with you, we are now 27 million. That means we are busy, we've been a busy population, so to speak. At least in NDBC alone, I know there are quite a few babies that have been made there. So we're a growing population. By the year 2050, our population is projected to reach 46 million. And by the year 2057, when Ghana turns 100, we expect to have about 50 million people. These are just demographic trends, extrapolating from fertility trends, which are relatively actually declining as well. Other factors that we look at. Now, in terms of the distribution of the population, in 2010, something interesting also happened. For the first time, we became a majority urban population. 50.1% of the population was found to be living in urban areas. As I speak with you, it's now just around 55% of the population living in urban areas. By the year 2050, we expect that figure to have reached 90% of Ghanaians living in urban areas. All these things have serious implications for the provision of a whole range of services, including educational services, where you need to place your schools and so forth and so on, housing, transportation. We already see what is going on with lack of planning. Accra itself, the region of Accra is now 90% urbanized. So it gives us an indication of what Ghana in 30, 40 years will look like as a 90% urbanized population. But we also see the challenges that Accra City itself, which happens to be 100% urbanized, is facing. Why? Because it didn't plan. Not 10 years, not 20, not 40 years. Accra City, those of you who travel in and out of the country, I'm sure you've seen the plane coming down and look out of the window. And what you see is not the prettiest of sights. Clearly no planning on paved roads and so forth and so on. And this is a country that's almost 60 years. We're 58 now. We'll soon be turning 60 years. Accra City itself is 100 years old. One of the oldest cities, over 100, not 100, but over 100 years old. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. And yet look at the state of planning. I just drove around here and I was simply impressed. I couldn't believe what is going, for instance, the park over there. And I'm just wondering, so all these years, it hasn't occurred to anyone to at least plant green grass there and raise a fence, just have a decent environment. Everyone who lives in this area, I'm sure, has traveled at some point or the other, been to London, been to Amsterdam, and seen the physical manifestations of development there. But somehow when we come back here, we don't want to do that. And so we need to do that. If we don't, if you think doing so is bad now, wait for the next 15, 20, 30 years where we haven't planned for that. We have done so now because we didn't plan 40 years ago. And if we don't begin to plan now, it's going to get even worse. Then we may have just doing no salt. Occasionally we may be lucky with the salt, but for the most part, it's going to be doomed. And so there's a price to pay for not planning. And then the question then is, why 40 years, as the young lady said? Let's leave the long-term aspect out for a second. I wasn't thinking of doing a PowerPoint presentation, but it would have been great if I had, because I would have shown you how the whole thing arises, how we derive that. I can still explain it to you. Since we returned to constitutional rule, we've had 5 medium-term plans. The first one was Vision 2020, which you've heard a lot about. It was actually a long-term plan of 25 years, and it was supposed to be broken down into 5 years each. We didn't do very well with that for a whole host of reasons. One, the process itself was so cumbersome, and those are some of the things we're reviewing now. They spent so much, they got consumed by process and kind of lost sight of the result itself. And so even though the first plan was supposed to be 5 years, effectively, it turned out to be 3 years. And when we had to change the government in 2000, the new government then threw that out. And so we were not interested because it missed the target so much, it didn't really make that much sense. And so we introduced GPRS, Ghana Poverty Reduction Strategy, for those of you who remember. We started 2002 to 2004. The World Bank took a look at it and said, no, they weren't happy with the content. They thought we could do better than that. So we had to redo it to 2003 to 2005. So that was also 3 years framework. But we learned from that. Don't forget that we were coming from decades of not planning. Structural adjustment, the economic recovery program were more meant towards stabilizing the economy and managing our way out of crisis. But there was no long-term perspective. And so we had no experience with that. And so in 2005, the government then took a decision that we should have a more structured medium-term approach to planning that also overlaps with the next government. And so the next medium-term plan then was 2006 to 2009. 2009 was chosen for a particular reason to suit our own political economy. Because the next election then was going to be when? 2008. And whichever government then came in 2009 was forced to implement the last year of the preceding government's development agenda and build its own medium-term plan. So that's exactly what happened, 2006 to 2009. Following the 2008 elections, which then brought in Professor Mills, he then had to prepare, he necessarily had to finish the last year of the preceding plan and then initiate his own plan, which started in 2010 to 2013. So from there on, we established a tradition of 4-year development plans. We have moved from the 3. I hear people say, why don't you do 5 and all that? Well, other people may do 5 because it suits their unique political economic conditions. We, from experience, have settled on 4-year development plans. And it's been structured in such a way that the last year of each medium-term plan spills over to the first year of any government that comes into power. That forces some sort of continuity, not the kind of continuity we ideally want, but at least it sets the basis for doing that. And as I said, Professor Mills then had to inherit 2009 and then prepare his own 2010 to 2013, which then expired, and it was replaced with the current one, which we call the GSGD, the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda, which started in 2014 to 2017. We are in the middle of implementing now. Come 2017, that one will run out. Of course, we are having elections next year. Whichever government or party wins must necessarily prepare the next medium-term plan that starts in 2018. And it's going to be 4 years. And here's the catch. Thereafter, we'll be having 4-year medium-term plans infinitum. So the next one, and then the next one, the next one. Perhaps I should share some of the dates with you, just so you have a sense of exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the dates. Okay, here. All right, my iPad is acting up. But basically, we're going to have a succession of 4-year plans afterwards. So the next one then, whether we have a long-term national development plan or not, the next medium-term plan starts in 2018 and ends in 2021. So 2018, there two people get confused. They think it's 3 years. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 will be when the next one ends. And we're having the next election after 2016. The next one is 2020. So that one also spills over. And then on and on and on and on. It just so happens that if we continue on that path for the next 10 medium-term plans starting in 2018, the 10th plan will end in 2057. you understand what I'm saying? Currently, we're in the middle of implementing a medium-term plan that ends in 2017. And we are supposed to start the next 4-year plan. And thereafter, another 4, another 4, another 4. 10 plans. The 10th one will end in 2057 when Ghana will be celebrating its 100th anniversary. At the same time, we'll have 10 elections over that same period, starting from 2020 to 2056. We'll have 10 elections. So whether we have a long-term national development plan or not, we are going to have these medium-term plans and elections. And then the question then is, why don't we situate them in a strategic context, which then gives us the long-term framework, so that we have a sense of purpose where we are going. Currently, we've been stumbling around along like a drum trying to get home. Just staggering. You may get home all right, but eventually you realize that you get home perhaps through the wrong route, taking you longer than you should have, maybe falling into the gutter and experiencing bruises and so forth and so on. So it pays, therefore, to merge these things. Here you have Parliament requesting that we should have a long-term national development plan. There's a demographic imperative that we need to prepare for the growth in population and the distribution of that population. And then it just so happens that our planning cycle will perfectly fit with a 40-year time frame. Now, I must emphasize that a 40-year plan doesn't mean a 40th year. It doesn't mean we wait till the 40th year. In fact, we don't have to wait for the plan itself to start in 2018. There's a lot of work that is going on now that will actually feed into that and will elaborate on that. So we don't, when we say a 40-year plan, people say, oh, well, it's too long and so forth and so on. You know, the person likely to be president of Ghana in 2057 is probably in this room here tonight. Yes. The average age of a president since the Fourth Republic has been 56 years old. By then, I'm reckoning the president is maybe 18 or thereabout, maybe in university or whatnot. By then, they should be 58. So that person is already here. The parliamentarians who will be governing this country are already here in schools all throughout the country. When I talked about the president being here, my daughter said, well, maybe that person, the president in 2057 is Wesley Girls. That's because she wants to go to Wesley Girls. So who knows? The president may be there already. The parliamentarians, the business chieftains, everybody, it's already here. So it is not completely out of the realm of possibility for us to begin to look 40 years into the future. When you have time, or those of you with access to the internet now, can Google as I speak, Stanford University's 100-year research program into artificial intelligence. That's the way the world is going. High-level thinking, bold thinking, taking risks, probing the future, trying to understand what is out there. Not just crouch in the corner there somewhere and say, well, like my cousin, I had a cousin last years ago, no, you cannot settle for the minimum in this case. You need to be expansive in your vision. I was going to do a radio program tomorrow. Unfortunately, it's been cancelled or postponed till tomorrow. I wanted them to play before I got to the studio Bob Marley's song from the Survival album, Wake Up and Live. How many of you know that song? Or you want me to sing it for you? Wake Up and Live song. There's a line in there that says, put your vision to reality. If you haven't, you can go to Google and YouTube and play that. A lot of inspirational songs. Put your vision. That's what we need to do. We've been too conservative for too long. And we paid a very, very high price for that. In 1962, for example, Ghana's per capita income was 73% higher than that of South Korea. 73% higher than that of South Korea. As I speak with you, our per capita income is only 7% that of South Korea. There's a high price to pay for our planning. Indeed, when we launched the plan, one of the people to compliment us for looking that far into the future was the head of the South Korean International Development Agency, KOICA, who reminded us that 40 years is not as long as we think, and that it took them 40 years. He actually gave us the date, 1960 to 2000. That's how long it took for them to transform their own economy. And South Korea has had pretty much the same number of military coups as we had. If you read the story, the last military strongman, Park Chung-hee, was assassinated, who's considered the father of South Korea. But one thing they had that we haven't had was a common vision of where they wanted to be. They decided at an early stage that the state and business must work together to promote Korea's development agenda, no matter what. So at some point, whilst Park Chung-hee, whose daughter, by the way, is now the president of South Korea, they came up with a law called the illicit acquisition of wealth, illicit acquisition of wealth law in South Korea, going after businessmen and businesses that had been evading taxes for so many years. They were all tried and found guilty. And then the government gave them an option. They said, well, you've all been found guilty. You are filthy rich from evading taxes. We have two options. One, you can go to jail and keep your money, or you can invest your money in strategic sectors chosen by the government of South Korea. And then keep your money, just invest, make the profit and all that. And that's what has given us the Samsungs. I'm sure more than 50% in this room here are using Samsung or LG TV and all those things. That's what then, of course, they worked around what is known as a childhood. But ultimately, it was this ability to see into the future, to be able to probe into the future that actually gave them that ability to transform the economy. You cannot transform your economy within the kind of political system we have now. 4 years, we cannot do that. You cannot even do that in 8 or 12 years, because the transformation must touch every aspect of our lives. One main element of the long-term national development plan would be a national infrastructure plan that necessarily will have to transform the infrastructure landscape of Ghana in all respects. Roads, ports, harbors, railways, civic infrastructure, even our markets and lorry parks must be transformed for the future that is evolving now. We have now what I call the malling, M-A-L-L-I-N-G, the building of malls around Ghana, the malling of Ghana. And it's going to be happening. You think ShopRite is just building anyhow? No, ShopRite has a long-term plan that by so and so date, we expect to see ShopRite in every major city in Ghana. And trust me, within the next 10 years, if not sooner, you're going to see ShopRite of malls in every city in Ghana. From Exim to Hamlet, from Hamlet to Paga, all the way to Aflaw, they will be all over the place. What are the consequences for the open air markets that have been the staple of Ghanaian economy for decades, if not centuries? Because when we use the term the Ghanaian economy, what are we referring to? The markets of lorry parks. We hardly have any factories. We hardly have any offices. That's where the action is, and yet they are threatened. Gradually, along with the growth of the middle class. The middle class, of course, you work hard, you leave office 7 o'clock in the morning. The open up markets are closed anyway. So you go to the mall. At least you can watch a movie afterwards. And so gradually, they are drifting there. The malls, for one thing, are cleaner. They are more diverse in terms of what they have to offer you. I'm told that even some of the foodstuffs that they sell there are cheaper at ShopRite than they are at the open air markets. Besides the fact that they are filthy, unhygienic. I live in Achimota. Sometimes I do take a walk, and now that the rains have started, if you happen to be in that area, go to the Dome Market and see the contradiction, the idiocy, pardon my expression, of our local officials who have no vision whatsoever. They're just there. They show up honorable, and that's all that gets into your heads. But the vision to actually transform is zero. Because you go there in the rain, of course when it rains, what happens? The whole place becomes very muddy, filthy, the garbage and everything. And someone is actually standing in that mud with his trousers tucked into his socks and collecting tolls. They're not even ashamed of the kind of disease that they're breeding. And now when you go there, you know, how many of you know Phyto Riker at Achimota, near St. John's? Have you seen the new mall there? Yes. And there's, of course, the ShopRite sign went there first before they actually completed the mall. And right around the corner is the Dome Market. What's going to happen? It's going to wither away, whether we like it or not. Most people are now going to go to the mall to buy their yam, because you can get yam, you can get pepper, you can get onions, you can get just about everything. Plus, it's cleaner. Maybe they will even put a movie theater there. And gradually, our mothers who use all these things to take care of us will find themselves, or their livelihoods diminished. So we need to anticipate these things and prepare for them accordingly. It's not unique to Ghana. Today we hear a word like supermarket, and we don't know the history of it. But when it started in Europe, it led to major social agitations. Well, super there, meaning that they had aggregated smaller shops into a single big place. And all the small shop owners started complaining. They had major, bloody, in some cases, tragic demonstrations to protest that. The only compromise they reached was that, okay, you can go ahead and have your supermarkets, but you shouldn't have prices below a certain level just to protect community shops. So when you walk into a supermarket in the US or UK or whatever, and you think the prices there are all set by the market, you're actually deceiving yourself. The government has already told them that you can go higher, yes, but you cannot go below that. These are social changes that interface with economic development that we need to begin to anticipate as we prepare for our future. There's, of course, the fiscal aspect of it. And as I said, the planning process itself is not a sequential or clearly delineated thing. Some of the activities are already going on. In 1963, Kwame Nkrumah launched the first ever national fiscal development plan that was supposed to span 1963 to 1970. We have it on our website. If you have the time, go to www.ndpc.gov.gh and download that and read it. It was quite a visionary document in which they had actually anticipated the amount of electricity that every single town back then was expected to need, to demand, and to utilize over that 7-year period. They knew where the factories, the roads, and everything were going to be. After the coup in 1966, we threw that away. And between 1966 and now, we have no fiscal development plan or even framework. It wasn't until February this year that we finally completed the new fiscal development plan, which is going to determine how we translate our social and economic aspirations into fiscal space. We haven't done too well with that. And there's a price to pay for that. It comes because there's an issue of productivity, for example, affected because you don't plan well, or access to certain kinds of services that you must have. You go to a place like La Paz, for example. Sometimes you're driving at night, you're not careful, you actually end up in somebody's compound because you built anyhow. The end result is that even though these days we are generating generating a lot of water. Ghana Water Headworks, most homes still cannot have water because places that have been set aside for water pipelines so that eventually everyone will have water have been built upon. So there's a price to pay for that. I mentioned the role of railways, for example. The only way, or one of the surest way to become globally competitive is for us to have a modern railway system, because it will radically reduce, for instance, the cost of transportation. Studies have been done that show that with railways, you can move equivalent of 1 ton of cargo over 500 miles for the equivalent of 1 gallon of diesel. That's with railway. We can beat that. And yet we've sat down and let our railway system simply deteriorate. We need to revisit that. And it's part of the long-term national development. Currently, we have around 660 kilometers of rail line, half of which don't work anyway. And we are anticipating putting up 4,000 kilometers of rail lines. All these, you cannot do that in 4 years. You can do that in 8 years. It has to be spread over the years. So once we've done that and have a long-term view of these things, every political party then will come in with its own agenda to do that. Now, lastly, the issue of the role of the digital sector in doing these things. Well, equally important, within the infrastructure plan, there's actually a section there for ICT and the role, the enabling and catalytic role of ICT moving this country forward. For example, we are now gradually moving towards a cashless society. And eventually we will get there as the economy goes through these changes. What are the implications for monetary policy? Because monetary policy assumes that there's going to be cash in the system. And when there's no longer cash in the system and everything is being carried out on telephones and so forth and so on, the central bank needs to set up and come up with new ways of doing that. We've already talked about digital printing. Where a time will come where you just buy a code and you put the code in there and it prints a pen for you or maybe a cup or something like that. 3D printing. What are the implications for us in terms of job creation, in terms of overall economic preparation? And then lastly, there's the issue of the global context of development itself. That's something we haven't really done much of in the past. In fact, all of our plans have never explicitly taken the global context into consideration. For the first time, we're actually going to do that. There's a section called Ghana and the international community. What can Ghana contribute to the international community, and what can Ghana get in return? Cyber warfare is here to stay, and we need to be prepared for that, especially as we become a prosperous nation. Then we become a target for all sorts of things. We need to understand what is going on in the rest of the world. China, for example. We speak of China as if it's some monolithic entity there, but there's a state side to the Chinese economy, there's a private side. How do we relate to that? If we want to keep saying that we need to add value and export more, but how do we do that? Where do we export? We need to understand all these things, and for the most part, the digital technology is going to play a major role in that. For us to understand, you need to be able to sit somewhere and do that. We talk, for instance, the Internet of Things, which we also need to prepare for, because a time is coming where a Mercedes-Benz may break down in Berlin, and the person who fixes it may be here at Adjei, who then has to get on their laptop, as Kwame is doing now, and fix the car in Berlin. The last thing they want to hear is that, oh, it's doom so I can fix it, or the connection is slow. When we do that, we lose out to those who don't have doom so and those who actually have something much better to offer. So these are the key elements of the long-term national development plan. As I said, it is now one huge document that just goes forever into the future. In a sense, we've already started implementing aspects of it. Policy reforms and all that will have to be done. There's what we call catalytic initiatives. These are preconditions. There are certain things we must do if the plan is to succeed, and we started working on them. One of them is land reforms. We need to deal with that. If you don't deal with that, you'll never have your peace of mind, and therefore you can never develop the infrastructure that you're talking about. Statistics, national statistics. Again, ICT comes in there. Civil registration and vital statistics. We just don't have a clue what is going on in this country. How many people are born on any given day? I'm told that something like 1 out of 5 people born in Ghana are not registered. And 1 out of 4 who died, nobody even keeps track of that. And yet that has implications for that. With ICT, we should be able to do those kinds of things. And of course, even tracking these things. I heard when we had the whole consultations today, and we keep hearing these suggestions that somehow if we move the capital from Accra to the middle of the country, we will live in heaven thereafter. It's just not true, because the problem is not the location of the capital. The problem is weak institutions, our own attitude. There's a whole segment of the plan that looks at attitudinal change. So if you move the capital to Mars, and lawless Ghanaians follow the capital to Mars, it'll just be a question of time before you see a Ghanaian on Mars standing by his brand new Mercedes-Benz, urinating on Mars, carrying out conversation on his phone and all that. So it's attitudinal, it's institutional. But the whole idea of us trying to live around our capital, national capital, should be a thing of the past. We should try and think of life around our communities, our district assemblies, our zonal councils. That's where the action is. So if you want a passport, if you travel from Accra to Sunyani, or you travel from Wa to Sunyani, you haven't really improved anything. So these are the kinds of institutional reforms and policy reforms also that we are going to be doing that. As I said, we are now doing the regional consultations. Volta was the 6th one. We have 4 more to do, and then we'll wrap it up in November. And then in early 2016, we'll resume again. But those ones will be more targeted. So we meet with professional associations, including professionals like you. We meet with government officials. We meet with all sorts of groups, with faith-based organizations, and then we'll get their ideas. And so by the middle of the year, we should have a fairly good idea of what the plan is going to look like. And then we'll take 2017 to begin to operationalize it. So we have time. It's not going to happen soon enough. There's still enough time for us to contribute to that. Then by 2018, hopefully we'll be able to begin full or formal implementation of the long-term national development plan. I call on every one of you to participate in doing that. You can go to our website, I've given you the website, but in terms of sending email, send it to info@ndpc.gov.gh. Any idea? We've been receiving contributions from all over the world. Ghanaians at home and abroad have been doing that. By all means, please also make it a point to send any ideas or suggestions that you have for the development of the plan. Thank you very much for your attention.
I think Mrs. Baker deserves a bigger Mr. Thompson, thank you very, very much, sir, for throwing so much light on this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a few snacks outside. Thank you very much for coming. This is the evening encounter. It's something that we do once every month. So when we do send you out an invitation, please come. Because it's always exciting. Thank you very much. The conversation continues outside.